June 6, 1944. 0:15 hours. Strongpoint WN62, Omaha Beach. Gerrit Hinrich so carefully wiped down the barrel of his MG-42 machine gun inside the concrete bunker overlooking the channel. In his pocket was a letter from his girlfriend in Metzingen. She promised to wait for him until the war's victorious end. The invasion will be their grave. We will throw them back into the sea within hours. He had written those exact words to her just 3 days earlier, after Feld Marshal RML himself had inspected their position. The Desert Fox had peered through So's gun aperture, studied the overlapping fields of fire, and nodded with satisfaction. When they come, RML had said, this beach will be their cemetery. Through the small embrasure, So saw nothing but peaceful darkness over the channel. The night was calm, almost beautiful. 12 hours later, this same young man would be found inside the bunker, crying uncontrollably. Around him would lie 13,500 empty shell casings. His MG-42 barrel would be warped from the heat. And in front of him, an invasion force so massive that his brain would refuse to believe what his eyes were seeing. Later, So would claim he caused between 1,000 and 2,000 casualties. But historians know that can't be true. Total American losses at Omaha Beach from all causes were around 2,400. The mathematics of German defeat weren't written in intelligence reports or strategy papers. They were written in the shocked testimonies of soldiers like So, men who saw the largest amphibious invasion in human history from the wrong side of the gun sight. The Atlantic Wall stretched 2,400 miles from Norway to the Spanish border, what German propaganda called the strongest defensive line in military history. Along the Normandy coast, 58 divisions of varying quality manned positions built with 17 million cubic meters of concrete and 1.2 million tons of steel. Hitler himself had declared it impregnable. At Omaha Beach alone, German defenses seemed to prove that confidence right. 8 concrete bunkers, 35 pillboxes for artillery positions, 18 anti-tank gun positions. The stage was set for a battle that would rewrite history before the day was over. 45 rocket launcher sites, 85 machine gun nests, and 6 mortar pits. The beach itself had been turned into a killing field. In the tidal zone, 3,700 deadly obstacles had been planted, Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, and wooden stakes tipped with teller mines. Behind the beaches, 6.5 million mines were buried. RML had actually wanted 60 million. Colonel Ernst Goth, commander of the 916th Grenadier Regiment near Bayeux, had calculated the defensive power of his sector. His 4 batteries could, in theory, fire 120 rounds per minute into the beach. Together with other batteries, the Germans believed they could unleash overwhelming fire on any landing. But those calculations depended on something they didn't really have: unlimited ammunition. That mistake would prove deadly. June 5th brought terrible weather. Walter Stubbe, a Luftwaffe meteorologist in Paris, declared invasion impossible. Winds blew at 20 to 25 knots. Waves hit 6 feet. Clouds hung low at 500 feet. Stubbe, using U-boat and weather station data, assured High Command that these bad conditions would last at least 2 weeks. Confident in this forecast, many German officers left their posts. RML went to Germany to celebrate his wife's birthday, taking with him a pair of gray suede shoes he'd bought in Paris. General Friedrich Dahlmann, commanding the 7th Army, ordered division commanders to attend war games in Rennes. Even naval patrols that usually swept the channel were cancelled because of the storm. This weather confidence would become the first German miscalculation. Unknown to Stubbe, the Allies had weather stations in Greenland and weather flights over the Atlantic. They detected a short 36-hour break in the storm. James Stagg spotted the window, and Dwight D. Eisenhower seized it. At 23:15 on June 5th, German radar along the Normandy coast picked up unusual activity. Freya and Würzburg radar sets showed huge aerial formations coming from the north. But operators had seen this before. Allied fake raids meant to keep them alert. Then, at 0:30 on June 6th, everything changed. Reports started pouring in that didn't fit any expectations. Paratroopers were landing all over Normandy. Some reports said they were to the east. Others said west. Some claimed they were British. Others American. To make it worse, the Allies had dropped dummy paratroopers with firecrackers attached, part of Operations Titanic and Rupert. It was total chaos. Major Hans von Luck, commander of the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment of the 21st Panzer Division, was one of the first to realize how serious this was. Woken up by reports of paratroopers near his positions, he immediately requested permission to counterattack. The answer from headquarters: do not move until the situation clarifies. Von Luck would later write in his memoir how that moment, a moment of hesitation, became a turning point. "Commander, I knew at that moment we were lost. The paratroopers were clearly marking the flanks for a landing. Every minute we waited gave them time to dig in. Yet we sat there, frozen by our own command structure." June 6, 5:30 hours. As the first gray light spread over the channel, German forward observers began reporting something their training had never prepared them for. Verliskart, whose presence at the coast is still debated by some historians, including Hinrich so himself, was credited in some accounts with being one of the first to report the armada. What's certain is that German observers across the Normandy coast saw a sight that defied belief. From horizon to horizon, the sea was filled with ships. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Every kind of vessel imaginable, from massive battleships to tiny landing craft, stretched across the channel like a gray carpet. The invasion fleet included 6,939 vessels, according to official Allied records, 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 support vessels, 864 merchant ships. This was the largest naval armada in human history. For German defenders who had grown up on propaganda about Allied weakness and disunity, the sight was a psychological shock. Bernhard Ferking, an artillery officer at WN-62 who would be killed later that day, reportedly told his men, "We're witnessing the whole world arriving on our doorstep." At 5:35 hours, the naval bombardment began. Nothing in the German defenders' experience, not the Eastern Front, not the heaviest RAF raids, could prepare them for what came next. The battleship USS Texas, BB-35, alone fired 255 14-inch shells at Point Du Hoc in just 34 minutes, according to U.S. Navy records. HMS Warspite, the first ship to open fire on D-Day around 5 o'clock hours, would deliver over 315 15-inch shells in the first 2 days, including 96 rounds on June 9th. The total naval bombardment unleashed on German positions was greater than anything the Wehrmacht had ever faced. German veterans later told the German Federal Archives that even concrete bunkers, built to resist the worst bombardments, cracked under the assault. The naval gunfire was relentless. Men were buried alive, dug out, and buried again as shells kept pounding the shore. The psychological impact was just as devastating as the physical destruction. These fortifications, the ones they had trusted completely, were crumbling like sandcastles. As the bombardment went on, the Luftwaffe's reaction exposed just how desperate the German position really was. Joseph Pips Priller, commander of Jagdgeschwader 26, received orders to attack the invasion fleet with his entire force. His recorded response in the Wing's war diary was brutally honest. "What entire force? I have 2 planes." The Luftwaffe, which had once promised air superiority over any invasion, could only launch 319 sorties on D-Day. The Allies flew 14,674 sorties. According to United States Office of Naval Intelligence, Priller and his wingman Heinz Wudersick carried out the only Luftwaffe attack on the beaches that morning. In their Focke-Wulf FW-190A, 8 fighters, they strafed Sword Beach once, then fled from overwhelming Allied fighter cover. This single, desperate strafing run by just 2 planes against the largest invasion force in history became a symbol of German powerlessness. The Knights of the Air, who were supposed to dominate the skies, had been reduced to a futile gesture. At 6:30 hours, the first assault waves reached the beaches. Despite the bombardment, the German defenders manned their positions and opened fire. What followed was carnage that even hardened veterans would never forget. Heinrich So, the machine gunner at WN-62, began firing at 6:35 hours. His bunker, one of the few that survived the naval attack, had a perfect line of fire across Omaha Beach. In his 2005 memoir WN-62, Erinnerungen in Omaha Beach, he wrote that he fired 13,500 rounds over 9 hours. While So claimed massive casualties, historians point out that his position, though deadly, was just one of many factors that caused the bloodshed at Omaha. Specific numbers can't be verified. What is certain is that his MG-42, firing at 1,200 rounds per minute in short bursts, played a major role in what would forever be remembered as Bloody Omaha. The German defenders were now facing what military historians would later call material shock, the mental collapse that happens when soldiers confront overwhelming force. No matter how many Americans, British, or Canadians fell, more came. Every destroyed landing craft was replaced by 3 more. Every silenced machine gun was crushed by what felt like endless naval gunfire. By midday, German units were reporting critical ammunition shortages. Their defensive plans had assumed they'd be fighting a limited assault, not an invasion of this scale. According to Wehrmacht supply records, positions that had ammunition calculated for a 3-day battle ran out in just hours. Artillery batteries, the backbone of the defense, faced the same crisis. Their carefully hoarded ammo disappeared under the sheer intensity of the fight. Attempts to bring forward reserve stockpiles failed. Every road was under constant attack from Allied fighter bombers. The contrast in firepower was overwhelming. German observers watched as American destroyers fired hundreds of shells at a single target, while German artillery was reduced to just 4 shells per gun per day by the afternoon of D-Day. The German Armored Reserve, the force Erwin Rommel had promised would crush any invasion on the beaches, stayed frozen during the critical morning hours. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armored unit close to the beaches, did not receive orders to attack until 10 o'clock hours, 4 hours after the landings began. When the 21st Panzer finally moved at 16:20 hours, they advanced between British airborne landing zones toward the coast. Divisional records show they reached the shore between Lyon-sur-Mer and Luc-sur-Mer around 1900 hours, the only German armored unit to make it to the coast on D-Day. But at 2100 hours, they witnessed the arrival of Operation Mallard, 250 gliders bringing reinforcements to the 6th Airborne Division. Seeing this massive air armada as a threat to their flanks, they withdrew. The division lost 54 tanks and armored vehicles that day, about 25% of their total strength in a single day. The German counterattack ran into something they had never seen before, specialized Allied armor. 79th Armored Division's Hobart's Funnies, modified tanks with mine-clearing flails, flamethrowers, and bridging gear, looked like they belonged to a different era of warfare. Throughout D-Day, German units faced threats they had never encountered at this scale. Massive airborne forces were already operating behind their lines. The 6th Airborne Division from Britain and the 82nd Airborne Division and 101st Airborne Division from the U.S. created chaos far beyond their numbers. Friedrich von der Heydt, Germany's most experienced paratrooper commander with the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, was in Normandy during the invasion. His professional assessment, recorded in post-war interviews, was brutally honest. The Allied airborne operation was everything ours had never been. Massive, coordinated, and supplied. We dropped battalions. They dropped divisions. We were supplied by single aircraft. They had endless streams of gliders and transport planes. The psychological impact of Allied paratroopers appearing everywhere paralyzed German responses. Some units refused to move, terrified of ambushes. Others fired at shadows, sometimes at their own men. The confusion grew, multiplying German problems with every hour. As D-Day went on, German command and control fell apart. Allied aircraft systematically destroyed communication lines. The French resistance, activated by coded BBC messages, cut telephone cables and blew up relay stations. Allied electronic warfare units jammed German radio. Max Pemsel, Chief of Staff of the 7th Army, tried to coordinate the defense from his headquarters at Le Mans. His war diary showed growing frustration as contact with forward units disappeared. By noon, entire divisions had vanished from the communication network. Individual commanders were forced to act alone, blind to the bigger picture. As darkness fell on June 6th, surviving German defenders finally took stock. The so-called impregnable Atlantic Wall had been breached in multiple places. The Luftwaffe had essentially ceased to exist over Normandy. The Kriegsmarine had managed to sink just one destroyer, USS Corrie, DD-463, while losing 15 E-boats and many smaller craft. Wilhelm Richter, commander of the 716th Division, which had taken the full weight of the British assault, reported to 7th Army headquarters. Division combat strength, 35%. All coastal strongpoints lost. Artillery 90% destroyed. Enemy advancing inland. The numbers told the truth. This was a total tactical failure, no matter how many acts of heroism individual soldiers showed. In just one day, German forces suffered casualties equal to a major battle, while the Allies kept landing fresh troops as if D-Day was only the beginning, not the end. Throughout the night of June 6th to 7th, German units tried to regroup and counterattack. But every move they made exposed just how overwhelming Allied power had become. Every German movement was spotted by radar, lit up by flares, and wiped out by artillery or naval gunfire. Hans von Luck's Panzer Grenadiers, finally released to counterattack, advanced toward Sword Beach under cover of darkness. In his memoir, he remembered what happened next. We were immediately illuminated by parachute flares and hit by devastating fire from destroyers offshore. It was like daylight. Every vehicle, every soldier was visible. The shells came from the sea with perfect accuracy. We lost half our strength without seeing a single enemy soldier. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements kept coming. The artificial mulberry harbors were already being assembled. Supply ships anchored in neat, organized rows. The invasion wasn't just succeeding, it was turning into a permanent foothold. German reinforcements trying to reach Normandy ran into total movement interdiction. Every road, railway, and bridge was under constant Allied air attack. According to Wehrmacht transportation records, units that should have reached the front in one day took up to 2 weeks. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, stationed near Toulouse, took 17 days to reach Normandy, a trip that should have taken just 3. By the time they arrived, they had lost 30% of their vehicles to air attacks without ever engaging the enemy. The psychological impact was crushing. If they couldn't even reach the battlefield intact, how could they hope to change the outcome? Meanwhile, Allied logistics ran like a machine. Landing ship, tank, LSTs, lined up in perfect coordination, offloading supplies and troops without pause. LSTs, landing ship, tank, unloaded entire armored regiments in just a few hours. Within days of D-Day, the Allies were landing 15,000 tons of supplies every single day, more than the entire German army in Normandy used in a week. By June 12th, German forces in Normandy were nearing psychological collapse. They had lost 26,000 men, killed, wounded, or missing, equal to 2 full divisions. Replacements were almost non-existent. Meanwhile, Allied strength was growing hour by hour. Corentin fell on June 12th, linking Utah and Omaha beaches. The German paratroopers of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, elite soldiers who had never retreated before, broke and fell back in disarray. Their commander, Friedrich Fonder, reported to headquarters. "My regiment no longer exists as a combat unit. The survivors are psychologically broken." On June 13th, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann scored one of the few German tactical victories in Normandy. British records say he destroyed 13 to 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 to 15 personnel carriers in the Battle of Villers-Bocage in just 15 minutes. German propaganda celebrated the victory, trying to prove that German arms could still prevail. But even this showed how hopeless the situation was. Wittmann's Tiger tank was disabled in the fight, and replacing it was a struggle. The British replaced their losses in just hours. The bravery and skill of individual German soldiers could not beat industrial mathematics. Wittmann himself, with 138 confirmed tank kills across all fronts, was killed on August 8th when his Tiger tank was destroyed. Whether it was British gunner Joe Ekins of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry or Canadian forces remains disputed. The Wehrmacht's greatest tank ace was taken out by an enemy that could afford to trade 10 tanks for 1 Tiger. The fall of Cherbourg on June 26th was another psychological blow. This major port, fortified for over 4 years and defended by 21,000 men, was supposed to hold for months. It fell in just 5 days of hard fighting. General Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, who had sworn to defend Cherbourg to the last bullet, surrendered on June 26th. In his post-war interrogation, he admitted that resistance became meaningless against unlimited enemy resources, a message repeated again and again in German accounts of Normandy. Then came Operation Cobra on July 25th, the knockout punch. U.S. Army Air Force records show the preparatory bombardment used 1,153 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, and 550 fighter bombers, dropping more than 4,100 tons of bombs on an area just 7,000 yards wide and 2,500 yards deep. General Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, commanding Panzer Lehr Division, reported to Army Group B. My division is annihilated. The psychological effect on the survivors is indescribable. They are no longer soldiers, but broken men. The bombing was so massive it even killed Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer killed in the war, in the European theater. Even American generals who thought they were observing from a safe distance were not safe. If American generals weren't safe from their own firepower, what chance did German soldiers have? The Falaise Pocket, August 12th to 21st, became the graveyard of German forces in Normandy. According to Allied intelligence reports, later confirmed by German records, around 10,000 German soldiers died in the pocket and 50,000 were captured. More than 300 tanks and armored vehicles were destroyed, along with 2,500 other vehicles. German soldiers who tried to escape described scenes of pure apocalypse. Roads were covered with dead horses and burning vehicles. Allied fighter bombers attacked in waves every 20 minutes. Artillery rained down without pause. The destruction was so overwhelming that many German troops simply surrendered, choosing captivity over certain death. The final numbers from the Normandy campaign tell a story of total German defeat. From June 6th to August 31st, Germany suffered roughly 320,000 casualties, 30,000 killed, 80,000 wounded, and 210,000 missing or captured. They lost 2,300 tanks, essentially all their armor in France, and 2,127 aircraft. In comparison, Allied losses were 29,672 casualties, but replacements were arriving faster than losses. They lost about 4,000 tanks, but these were replaced within weeks. They also lost 4,111 aircraft, a fraction of their total force of more than 13,000 planes. The contrast showed the brutal truth. Germany was fighting a war of attrition it could never win. The Allies had nearly unlimited reserves. Friedrich von der Heydt, the paratrooper commander, later became a professor of international law. He wrote, "Normandy taught us that the era of warrior heroes was over. War had become a matter of industrial capacity, and we had challenged the world's greatest industrial power with horses and outdated dreams." For German soldiers, D-Day was more than a military defeat. It was an ideological and psychological collapse. Men who had once conquered most of Europe discovered how wrong their beliefs about their enemies had been. They expected weak, divided democracies, but instead they faced an alliance that had turned war into an efficient industrial machine. They saw democracy's arsenal in action. Endless ships, planes, tanks, and supplies flowing from factories with unimaginable capacity. The German defenders of Normandy learned a brutal truth. Modern wars are not won on the battlefield by the bravest soldiers. They are won in factories, by the most productive societies. They realized that the Western Allies had changed the nature of war. They had turned it into a kind of math problem, where production numbers mattered more than brilliant tactics. Heinrich Seele began June 6th believing the invasion would be crushed in just a few hours. He ended the day surrounded by thousands of empty shell casings, watching endless waves of Allied reinforcements landing on the very beach he was supposed to hold. His personal experience reflected the bigger German tragedy in Normandy. Tactical skill meant nothing against overwhelming force. The beaches of Normandy were not just a battlefield, they were a revelation. German soldiers saw the future of warfare, and it belonged to the countries that could produce the most and use it with precision. The Germans had courage, training, and determination. The Allies had unlimited industrial power. Trying to stop the Allied invasion was like trying to stop the tide with bare hands. German soldiers fired until their gun barrels melted, fought until they ran out of ammunition, and then watched as the Allies simply brought more of everything. The cold mathematics of modern war made their bravery meaningless. The German soldiers who faced D-Day learned one of history's harshest truths. In an age of industrial warfare, if your nation can't match your enemy's production, no amount of skill or sacrifice can save you. They began June 6th as proud warriors of the Third Reich and ended it as stunned witnesses to the terrifying power of the arsenal of democracy. Their defeat wasn't just military, it was total. It was the moment when Nazi dreams of racial superiority and military dominance smashed against the hard reality of Allied industrial supremacy. The invasion they thought they would throw back into the sea instead swept them away, taking with it the last illusions of German victory.